welcome back to Phaser Tech. So today I'll be sharing my success story on reviving a dead GPU and give you some tips on how I did it. Now if you were to search Google to find out ways on how to fix your broken GPU, you'll probably come across forum posts and other sites suggesting that you bake your GPU in the oven. And while this might work for some people, it's usually a better idea to troubleshoot it first and determine what's wrong before deciding how to proceed. The oven method should be more of a last resort option. It's a gamble more than anything else, and by doing a little troubleshooting instead, you'll increase the odds of fixing your broken GPU, and you won't run the risk of tainting your oven with toxic chemicals either. Of course, this all depends what went wrong with your GPU. One of the more common issues is in the VRM section where Mosfets can overheat and blow out, causing a short in the power rail. Well, that's exactly what happened to my GTX 980 Ti over a year ago. And it wasn't just one bad MOSFET, but two. And the most interesting thing of all is that the card still works perfectly fine at stock clocks, even with those MOSFETs missing. And I was able to repair it with nothing more than a $20 heat gun from eBay. A proper hot air rework station will give better results, but those are more expensive. Personally, I wish I invested in one sooner, but it may not be worth it for you if you don't plan to use it on other projects. Ideally, you'd want to replace them, but it's not always possible to find the correct model MOSFETs. Also, you might find that it's easier said than done to remove them cleanly. And in my case, I actually damaged the pads a little bit, so it wouldn't be possible to replace them easily. You can see right here where the missing MOSFET was. And this heatsink right behind it is covering where the second missing MOSFET was. But it turns out the card still functions perfectly fine at stock clocks. This is because VRMs are designed to have plenty of headroom and can handle more current than the card will actually pull. As long as the card is underclocked or at the most stock clocks, then the remaining VRMs can handle the extra load as long as their temperatures stay in check. Now let's talk about how to diagnose this and determine if you have a shorted MOSFET. The main symptom you'll probably notice is that the PC will not turn on when the card is inserted and powered. That's because the power supply has a feature to detect if there's a short, and it'll prevent itself from turning on if there is. This will be your first clue, but to verify this, you should get your multimeter and measure the resistance from the 12-volt rail to ground on the GPU. The easiest way to do this is to follow this diagram of the PCIe power connectors and place the probes across the red and black pins. If the VRMs are working as they should, then you should see a very high resistance in the mega ohm range. However, if you measure little to no resistance, then that means you have a short, and most likely the culprit is a blown out MOSFET. Typically, the bad MOSFET will have physical damage, so it should be easy to spot. But that's not always the case. In order to check which MOSFETs are bad, you'll need to probe each of them individually. To do this, place one of the probes directly in front of the MOSFET. There will typically be a resistor with exposed pads that you can use. Just make sure you use the side of the resistor that's going into the MOSFET, and then place the other probe on ground. Again, if you see a low resistance, then that means there's a short in the MOSFET and it needs to be replaced or at least removed. Since I did this repair over a year ago, this video isn't meant to be a detailed guide, but I'll point you in the right direction so you can learn how to do it. I'll leave a link in the description to a good video I found that explains how to use the heat gun to remove SMD components. But basically, you'll need to aim the gun around the part you want to remove and keep the heat on it until the solder melts. Then you can remove it with tweezers. However, it can be tricky because you don't want to overheat it and damage the components or knock surrounding components loose. But at the same time, you'll need to apply heat for long enough to melt the solder before carefully removing it. So it can take some time and some trial and error before you get it off. Also, I'll leave a link in the description below to a post I found on overclock.net where a user created a very detailed guide going over this exact issue with his 980 Ti. The reason why I didn't want to open up my own 980 Ti is because I also decided to use it as an experiment with liquid metal to see how that performs. In case you didn't know, you don't want to remove the heatsink after applying liquid metal. because the silicon die will most likely crack. Alright, let's get to the proof that this card still works even with 2 missing MOSFETs. Let's play some Titanfall 2. To be perfectly honest, I don't play any online shooters except for this game. It's probably one of the most underrated multiplayer shooters around, so I suggest you check it out. The official servers for the game were hacked and have been down for a while now, but the community created a mod called Northstar that opens up custom servers and has a good number of active players on it. But the important takeaway here is the performance. You can see the gameplay is very smooth, running at 1440p and it never dips below 60 FPS. The temperatures are also extremely cool since the card is running at stock clocks and has plenty of cooling from the large third-party cooler I added. Also, the liquid metal I mentioned earlier is helping to shave off a few degrees. I thought this GPU would be a good candidate to test liquid metal since the card has damage to begin with, so I wouldn't feel too bad if it didn't work out. There's a risk of liquid metal dripping off the die and shorting out components, so I carefully placed liquid electrical tape on the components around the die. Plus, I figured if I could further drop the GPU temperature, then that should help keep the other components cooler too, especially the remaining MOSFETs. Well, the results from the liquid metal were good, but not game-changing. I found that it dropped the temperatures by about 2 or 3 degrees C, so while it's definitely an improvement, I don't think it's worth the trouble and risk. But anyway, that was just a little extra tip I thought I'd throw in. So overall, I'd say this fix was a massive success. The 980 Ti is about 7 years old now, but it can still deliver good gaming performance today. When I fixed it last summer, the GPU market was absolutely insane, and I couldn't imagine paying those prices for a new GPU, so I was really lucky to get it fixed at the time. It's been running flawlessly for over a year now despite missing those 2 MOSFETs. It's hard to tell whether my gimped 980 Ti will be able to hobble along for much longer, but who knows, maybe it will continue to live a long and prosperous life. Now that the GPU prices are back down at MSRP more or less, I might be picking up a new one soon, but we'll see. They're still overpriced if you ask me. But anyway, thanks for watching and I hope this video was helpful. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more videos. See you next time.